Good morning, everyone. I'm Grace Simmons, Programme Manager at NLA, and I'm very pleased to introduce the chair of today's event, founder of Fame Collective, Tunpa Husna Yasmin Fellows. Tunpa is an award-winning British architect and co-founder of the interdisciplinary practice Art Building Design, the charity Manon Foundation Trust, and founder of Fame Collective and Asian Architects Association. She is a senior lecturer in architecture at the University of Westminster and was awarded the Reba J. Rising Star Award in 2017, a commendation for the Reba President's Award for Research in 2019, and was recognised as Reba BAME Award winner in 2019. Tunpa has also been appointed to be on the design review panel for the Southwark Council Planning Department. So I think it's safe to say we are in good hands for today's event. So over to you, Tunpa.
Thank you very much, Grace, for that kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our event. Fame Collective present Pathways to Success in the Built Environment. Fame Collective celebrates the successes of the female architects of ethnic minority and exposes the barriers they face through narratives of their lived experiences, sharing their pathways to success and the challenges they have overcome in their career from both public and private sector. Through this lens, we would like to review the systematic inequality in the built environment and planning system. In the aftermath of COVID-19, how can policies, procurement, and planning systems enable the voices of underrepresented communities to address inequality and to consider the social values of places, buildings, and neighborhoods? How can we carve a role to support communities and local authorities to work with private clients to achieve better social values and to create an inclusive place and a city for all? This event will provide an important opportunity to discuss the barriers in the built environment and the routes out to ensure the success of people, place, and project. Next slide, please. This event is part of a research project conducted by Fame Collective through a series of participatory events, such as this one, which was hosted by the Architecture Foundation in December. A series of events Fame Collective are curating to explore the impact of racism, injustice, and inequality contributing to the barriers in architecture and the built environment. We want to hear about your lived experiences. We want to hear about the lived experiences of practitioners, academics, students from BAME backgrounds to unpack the grievances. Audience participation is very much encouraged to share your experiences and perspective. I'd like to thank the NLA. Thank you for hosting this event. I'd like to thank especially Grace Simmons and Molly Nicholson from NLA, and also Sarah Dawidi from Fame Collective, who worked with me to bring you this event. The event of 2020 have inspired collective actions and seen an increase in grassroots groups, such as Fame Collective, to rise up against injustice and various social and health inequalities, which have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Fame Collective is a network that was started during the pandemic. Next slide, please. If you are unfamiliar with Fame Collective, we are a research-based network founded to support women of diverse backgrounds and ethnicity in architecture and the built environment. Fame is responding to an urgent need for understanding how race and gender affects established and young practitioners from diverse backgrounds, knowledge, and practices by engaging in conversations about the barriers in architecture. Our aim is to raise awareness of the barriers and inequality and lack of diversity in architecture and the built environment, and to demand change that responds to our collective challenges. Fame was founded to create a supportive network for female architects of minority ethnics. but we're open to collaborate with all, regardless of their skin color or gender. And we welcome you all to share experiences of discrimination. We invite you to join Fame Collective and get in touch with us if you'd like to work with us and to see how we can make a change and how we can provide support for you. I'd like to say that we have a poll, which should come up on your screen now. You're not obliged to answer the questions on the poll, but if you would like to participate, you can take a moment now and answer the questions. Next slide, please. Now, if I can turn to our brilliant speakers, I'd like to thank you all. Thank the speakers for their kindness and for sharing their experiences of their pathways in their career. We're delighted to have Pooja Agrawal as a keynote speaker for this event, who will be joined by our distinguished panelists, Dr. Terry Okoro, Sue Pei Choi, and Manisha Patel. Thank you all for attending this event and being part of this important discussion. We invite you all to join the participation session in the second half of the event in the breakout rooms to have a direct discussion in smaller groups with our speakers, where we would like to provide the opportunity for you to share your experiences. This can be done anonymously if you prefer, by turning your camera off. Next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you. So now I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, Pooja Agrawal. Pooja is co-founder of social enterprise and co-host of spatial equality platform Sound Advice. She's an architect, planner, who works as a public servant at Homes England and previously at the Greater London Authority, Publica, and We Made That. She's a fellow at the Institute of Innovation and Public Purpose, associate at the Quality of Life Foundation, and a member of Design Southeast Review Panel. She has previously mentored at Fluid and Stephen Lawrence Trust and taught at Central St. Martin's. She was nominated for the Planners Woman of Influence in 2018 and 2019. Thank you, Pooja, for sharing your inspirational journey. Over to you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much, Sampa. And I'm generally very humbled to be a keynote speaker today. So the sort of what I'm going to be talking about is a pathways to success in the built environment. The next slide. When Tumpa and Fame Collective asked me to do this, I guess my first question was, what is success? And how do we define what success is? So I think it's a really hard question to answer, and it depends whose idea of success you're trying to fulfill. So if I think about it, maybe for my parents, being Indian, you know, we're really close to our families. Success was probably when I got admission into Cambridge University. I grew up in Mumbai and lived there till I was 16 and moved here. And education was always really critical and really important to my family. And that is where all of the resource and importance was based. If we think about maybe the industry, who is defining success? How is that sort of recognized? I guess awards is a big part of that. And, you know, being awarded the Planners Women Influence in 2 years in a row, I suppose that is a sign of success. Perhaps being a keynote speaker today is success. I guess what is the hardest thing is for me to define what I think success is myself, and I'm still figuring that out. But what I'm going to really talk about today is perhaps not focus on the barriers as much as what really drives me, what has sort of pushed me to be where I am today. And I'm going to sort of structure that around 3 kind of words: purpose, power, and people. So the next slide, please. I've always been really clear about what's important to me. And for me, that is always about the quality of design, architecture as an architect, on equality, making sure what we're doing reaches everyone and it's not an elitist, design is not elitist. And then the role the public sector plays in that. And I think my career has always sort of pulled these different threads into it. Next slide, please. So one of the first places sorry, next slide. Yeah. One of the first places I worked for was Publica, and what really interested me there was, despite being an architect, and this was over 10 years ago, I was really interested in the sort of influence we can have outside the red line boundary, and that for me was thinking about public space, who has access to it, how can we improve that? And the sort of methodology that Publica undertakes was really fascinating and interesting, just actually spending a lot of time there, getting to know a place by the people, how it's used, really influenced the way I think today. Next slide, please. Design quality has always been critical to me, and I worked at We Made That. At the time was a small architecture and urban design practice, and I was the project architect for Black Horse Lane regeneration, which again was interesting to think about. How do you look at a whole neighborhood and think about, hey, change is coming, how can we make sure this change is equitable, how can we work with lots of different people, be it the sort of guy who runs the cafe here versus the kind of workshop studio that Assemble were designing for local artists. And just being just really the kind of detail that you can think about, whether it's the sort of the quality of the sign that was posted here to make sure that truck drivers knew that this little cafe was here, versus the kind of much larger scale thinking of design inequality of the whole neighborhood. There was lots of housing coming. How do we actually think about how people move from one end to the tube station, for example? All of that was really interesting, and I really enjoyed doing that as an architect, again, thinking about that large scale. And next slide, please. I moved to the GLA sort of just over about, well, it was about 5 years ago, and I was working in the regeneration and economic development team. I think here what's important to say is the role of the client, coming from that architecture and urban design background, to then be on the other side of the table, I felt was quite empowering. So from designing and being project architect of sort of Black Horse Lane regeneration, I was suddenly overseeing multiple projects like that, be it this was a project in Kilburn, which was a community building, which included a sort of cafe, artist studios, affordable community space. So being able to actually start this project from scratch with a whole load of stakeholders, to again looking at the sort of improvement, regeneration of Northwest London as a whole. So that kind of thread of being really clear that what I believe in, quality, equality, and the role of public sector, has definitely driven me forward. Next slide, please. I've always been interested in the notion of power. Who holds this power? Who is driving this sort of change in the places we live in? And what is the politics of power? Next slide, please. I think there's lots of different ways you can explore this, and not taking any credit for this, but I sort of definitely got involved with sort of local projects that were happening on the ground. I live in Tottenham in North London, and I think it's a really interesting way to understand change that's happening, either as a kind of from a resident. We're all residents, we all live somewhere, and this was an amazing community-led housing project called Start in Tottenham, and I worked with this group as part of the group for just under a year before they got involved with the GLA, and then there was obviously a conflict of interest. But again, just driving change from that kind of bottom up was a really interesting learning experience for me. Next slide, please. Then going to the other scale, if we're sort of simplified to top up, top down, even sort of grassroots, top down, being involved in the Good Growth by Design program at the GLA, with Manisha being one of the main design advocates, actually influencing policy. There's a lot of power you can have there, just making sure just really fundamental things like everyone has natural light in their homes. Policy has this incredible power, and coming with this sort of architectural background and being able to influence policy, I think is really, really fulfilling and really important. And then next slide, please. I think the power of politics is also really important, that we can influence that in some way. Working at the GLA again and running a program, you are able to work with politicians like the mayor, and this was an event that held actually by the NLA, where the mayor really pushed the agenda of diversity in the built environment sector, come from all the evidence that our team sort of put together, and then having the mayor hold that mic and speak to the whole industry saying you need to make change, I think is really, really important and really influential. Next slide, please. So when we're thinking about power, I'm really interested in sort of who are the people who are really making this change. Next slide, please. So for me, the role of the public sector is incredibly important. Ultimately, for me, that is influencing the everyday person's life. You have the means to influencing finances, policy, you know, just the way people live at a very kind of basic level. And I think, again, that the role that you can have as a designer, as an architect, as a planner in the local, in the public sector is incredibly powerful. So I co-founded a social enterprise called Public Practice with Finn Williams. It's been about 3 years ago, and this social enterprise places people with multidisciplinary skills, including architecture, planning, sustainability, engineering, and we place them into local authorities for 1 year. They really are embedded in the public sector. They are part of a bigger team, wider team, and they're there as part of the team driving change. They spend sort of 80% of their time doing this, but also every other Friday they come together and push research, but it's really research from the ground. So what they're sort of doing in their local authorities. And this sort of cohort of change, kind of community of practice, I think is really, has a huge impact. And I think this again brings together all the things I've been really passionate about, whether it's sort of quality, equality, and again, the public sector, the influence you can have on everyday people's lives. Next slide, please. I'm also co-host of a platform called Sound Advice, and this is really about advocating for change. It's about spatial equality, and there's two aspects of that. That's about the industry, but it's also about who has the access to space, who has the access to resources. So Sound Advice, you can follow us on Instagram. It's really provocative. We use kind of quite bold statements and music as well to really challenge the industry to think about sort of what is it, why are we still here in 2021? And, you know, when you talk about sort of barriers, I just encourage you to look at our Instagram page, because that, you know, all of these sort of tips have come from us, but they've come from a whole community of people sort of sharing their experiences. But we do this, again, like I said, in a kind of provocative way to really spark change. Also part of this is really creating a community of support. It's kind of like a family of love, and we really encourage each other and push each other along the way. And I think, again, when we talk about barriers, for me, it's recognizing who is your support system to really push you, and who do you ask for help when you are in a vulnerable position. So finally, again, I question, what is success? Maybe it will be being a keynote speaker at an event, which is not about diversity, but really it's about questioning, you know, who is defining what the success is, and being certain that ultimately it's you who is sort of shaping this narrative, and it's up to all of us to sort of to own that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pooja. That was a very inspirational talk. So now we'll hear from Dr. Terry Okoro. Dr. Terry Okoro, a RIBA fellow, chartered project professional and inclusion champion, is a founder and director of TOCA, a RIBA of chartered practice. She sits on the diversity and inclusion panel of the Construction Industry Council. She's an expert advisor to Historic England. She delivered the RIBA 2020 seminars on diversity and inclusion and undertakes inclusion consultancies. Recently appointed to the ARB board, her previous roles include being non-executive director within the NHS and also at a leading London housing association. She was recognized as a RIBA Bain Award winner in 2019. Thank you. Terry, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I imagine that's my slides, yeah. So we'll be talking about pathways to success. Next slide, please. I always believe in the power of 3 because it's so easy to remember the number 3. So I'll be talking about myself, about challenges which I've come across in the industry, and then also about the wider societal role which we all have to play. Next slide, please. So about me, I mean, I'll just go back to basic. From childhood, I always had a passion for design. I'm sure there's lots of other people out there who have a passion for design. I did sculpture, designed cards, did millinery, everything you can imagine. But a success for me was being able to transition that passion for design into architecture, because quite a few people have that passion for design, but are not able to make that transition. So being aware of architecture as a possibility, I imagine, was the first success which I had going through the course and qualifying. But once I qualified, my interest was not just in designing single buildings. It was actually into the wider environment that we were placing these buildings in, and also about seeking solutions for the wider problems that people experienced. My area of specialty is particularly housing, and I was interested to address housing issues both in the UK and abroad. I actually had a desire to work for the UN, but that didn't happen. And I found myself with my family here in London. And so I've worked in social housing in the UK for local authority, for housing association, and now within my practice. But one of the things which I've always done within practice is not just designing buildings, is actually addressing issues and bottlenecks which I have come across, either in the design of these dwellings, like the documents and guidance which we had. And I felt that it didn't sufficiently reflect the people who we were designing, the families and households who were designing these dwellings for. And I actually undertook my doctoral research, which was looking at how Asian households use their domestic space, speaking to a range of households, Punjabi and Bangladeshi, to get an experience of what they wanted from households, and that is from dwelling design, and that has informed my design practice and my writing since then. But it was not just about seeking solutions, because it was solutions for the design, but also solutions for some of the issues we came across, things like the practice, entry into the profession, and that was where I sort of joined forces with others. But moving on, I've realized that it's not just about seeking solutions. You actually need a seat at the table where decisions are being made. And that's where I moved on to the crafting solutions, where I am able to sit on various panels, industry panels, and organizations that influence education and the built environment, to be part of the solutions which are being made, so that I have a voice at the table. I mean, different people will be involved in different elements, but we need people at all levels. And people may look at me and say, oh yes, she is a success, but like I said at the bottom, it can take a lifetime to be seen as an overnight success. And it's a journey, not a destination, because you never actually arrive there. Next slide, please. So I'll just go on to discuss some of the bottlenecks, because life is always full of challenges, and it's how you actually overcome them and what difference you make for others who are coming behind you. And for me, the issues which I faced reflect the general issues in the industry, what people find in education, what they find in employment. And on the right, I have a model which I developed in a research paper I presented at a conference, looking at the bottlenecks that individuals experience within organizations, trying to make their way through, because you actually need the leadership to recognize that there is a problem before you start to craft solutions. So for me, entering architecture, even though I knew it was something I wanted to do, actually posed a bit of a problem, because one of the A levels, which many schools say you require, is physics. Now, I had never studied physics. I wasn't really a science orientated individual. My A levels were a strange mix of biology, economics, and arts. There were a few schools of architecture that didn't require physics, and it limited my choice. But we have to ask ourselves, in the education and the entry requirements, are we restricting the range of people coming in by what we're asking at the entry point, and also maybe at the curriculum as well, which we're studying during the course. So I was able to enter architecture, and that was a success, and complete the course. Now, progressing my career, as a woman with a family, you have to make certain choices. For a start, the course is so long. And so if you're deciding to start a family after your education ends, you have to balance that with progressing your career and taking career breaks as well. I mean, I decided to have my children early and then quickly go back to the work, because if you lose out at the early stages of your career, it's always difficult to make it up. And so I chose carefully where I worked, like I said, mainly local authority and the housing associations, where they had equal opportunity practices for you to be able to progress your careers. And when you got in there, the policies were appropriate. There were things like flexible working. In fact, I always sort of try to negotiate to make the best situation for myself. Like when I got a role with a housing association, I actually negotiated to work a 9-day fortnight so that I had time off to undertake my research studies. When I had a role within a private sector, which was quite brief, I negotiated a later start time so that I could drop my kids at school. I must admit that I didn't last very long in that organization, because even though it was close to home, negotiated the time I wanted to work, I found that the stretch opportunities I had in other places, I didn't have there. I was stuck in the office, not being able to meet clients and undertake the sort of level of work I had previously had. And I made the decision within 2 months to move on. So it's quite important that if you're wanting to progress your career, you need to be in a situation where you have the opportunities to do so. And I had to take the risk to leave there and find another role. And I haven't actually looked back since then. And so within your career, you must always have some kind of long-term plan, and whether you achieve it in a straight line or you go sideways and then back again, it's important that you have that strategic view. The third item is focal walls, and many of you may be aware of that. But if you're not, it's a term which is used a lot in project management, and also the commercial wall, which means volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I mean, this is something we all face in our daily lives and in our careers. We know that the profession of architecture has changed, the context is changing, design and build is coming, the architect is no longer always the leader of the design team. And that's where project management has come in. And that was one of the reasons I made a decision to become a qualified project manager and not just an architect trying to do project management. And in fact, architects, I always say we're a bundle of skills. There's so much we can do. And if architecture is not working out for you, you could go into project management where you're helping to deliver buildings and deliver spaces without actually undertaking the design. The image on the left indicates the situation most people find themselves in, that you're going for an opportunity, a role, or entry into an institution, and it is never a level playing field. And until processes are changed and policies put in place, we will always be like the image on the extreme left. Sometimes policies are put in, but they don't actually alter the situation. There is still disadvantage. So we need to work to ensure that the policies which come in actually reduce that disadvantage and provide equitable outcome. And there's still a lot of education to be done so that people understand what the issues are and actually put policies and processes in place to alter that. Next slide, please. So now moving on and looking at the wider role of architects. Yes, we have to engage on our projects, but also we need to engage with the wider community. And so it's a case of what are you doing regarding the wider engagement, because it's not just about speaking to the converted or speaking to those who actually know. It's being able to reach out to a wider audience. And so yes, I do engagement on my schemes, speaking to the community around, but others need to ask themselves what they're doing. With this COVID situation, it's been a great time because lots of streets and communities are actually coming together. Where I live, we have a street WhatsApp group where we exchange information. Before COVID, we had a postcode group where we were exchanging information. And so are you part of your local community in that way? But in terms of bringing change, it needs to be a wider audience, the local authority, maybe government as well. So are we speaking to those individuals? Are we part of the decision making? I joined the board of my local health trust to be able to make a difference to the health care of the local community, because we know that if you're trying to address housing, if health is a problem, then housing doesn't actually resolve it. We need a holistic solution to some of these problems. And once we're there sitting at the table, it's a case of we need to reach agreements which people share and then take action, because words without action doesn't actually get you anywhere. So in a sense, it is what we make of it. It's what we put in. It's the discussions and conversations that we have. And so I'll stop there and sort of say, for architects, we need to think about our personal career, think about how we overcome the challenges and discuss with other people, and then also engage wider to make the difference we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. That was such an inspirational talk. Now we'll hear from Sue-Pei Choi. Sue-Pei Choi, having gained degrees in architecture at the Bartlett School of Architecture and Oxford Brookes University, had spent 20 years working in architectural practices, primarily on urban regeneration projects and affordable housing design. Working with social housing providers, her interest has principally remained with state regeneration, which led to a master's degree in urban design. Continuing with large-scale regeneration schemes, and her work has included GLA redevelopment projects, and latterly a transition to work as a design manager with Waits Residential, set up initially as a partnership to work with local authorities to deliver affordable housing. Current projects include the delivery of 386 new affordable houses with the B first, as part of the wider Gascoigne Estate regeneration in Barking. Thank you, Sue. Over to you.
Thank you, Tompa, and thank you for your invitation to speak at this event today. I think I would like to start more at the beginning. and talk about how I actually came into architecture. I was considering this more recently, where I've actually started mentoring teenagers as part of the Career Ready scheme. This is a charity set up to mentor essentially A-level students into work and higher education. And looking at the students that I'm now working with and have worked with in the past few years, they are generally quite high achievers, straight A students. And I initially thought it's quite strange that they should actually need mentoring, considering the drive that they have, although they come from working class backgrounds. They obviously have difficulties which they face, but actually looking at their achievements, like I say, straight A students, and I did wonder why they actually needed me to help them through the process of going through into the transition into higher education and work. But just reflecting back on myself, I also came through, like Pooja has said, from an Asian background where education is the driver, where parents obviously like to push for a higher education, going to university, and that's the pathway to what they perceive as success. And having gone to university and done my part 1 at the Bartletts, I actually struggled to get work. And when I sat down with my tutor for my year out, she actually was quite surprised. And after several months said, well, let me take a look at your CV. Obviously the CV just ticked all the boxes, had the right images, had the right information, A-level results, university degree. And then she asked me, well, do you have another name? Which is quite surprising. No, I don't have another name. And she then pointed out that actually having a name which was very difficult to pronounce and on paper didn't look English was possibly holding me back. So obviously establishing that I didn't have another name than the one I have. The compromise we came to was that I would put in quite bold letters at the top of my CV that nationality was British. And I think this was probably the first time that it actually dawned on me that having good A-level grades, going to a top university, was actually not enough to be seen as someone who a company would like to employ, and I would have to make myself stand out from that. And this is what I am trying to help with the students that I'm mentoring as well. And I think coming, as Pooja says, from a background where your parents possibly don't know anything other than to succeed, you need good academic grades. Actually, that's not quite enough. You need other things which make you stand out from the crowd, particularly in a context outside of your background, as it were. I think growing up in Britain, having been born here, I didn't really ever think that was a problem. I had always achieved to do well at school, and I was always brought up to believe that that would be enough. And it was only when I did my part 1 and realised actually I was struggling to get a job that this may be an issue. And quite fortunately, when I did put that I was British on my CV, within a couple of weeks I was actually offered a job, which was with HTA, and I was quite fortunate there that I mean, landed on my feet really. Worked with the only female director in the company, who was a real inspiration to myself as a young architect, obviously going into the field for the first time. Not only did she guide me in becoming a good architect, but also seeing how she navigated the world of, you know, a company of 100 people and being the only female director. And that was a really good grounding, I think, for me as, like I say, a young female architect. But not only that, again, with what Terry has mentioned as well, seeing architecture not just as buildings, but actually buildings in place. And the work that I did with HTA was the first time I'd really looked at estate regeneration And having grown up in a council estate my whole life at that point, I'd never really looked at it differently, I guess, because you're just used to your surroundings. And it was really working with HTA and the director there who opened my eyes up to, actually, as architects, we can do much better. We can actually use what we know as architects to make an impact on people's lives. And that was a really good grounding. And it was from there really that I actually had a love for estate regeneration housing, but particularly affordable housing. And that was, it was a happy accident actually, after kind of 5 or 6 months of being unemployed and adding my nationality on my CV, that within a couple of weeks I just landed at HTA. And it was from there that really I had a passion for really social housing. And after my part 2, I then went on to do an MA in urban design and have really built on that ability as architects to make people's lives different to what it is and what they know. And I think having that stepping stone and having that tutoring and guidance from a really strong female architect at that time in my career was really important, because it really set out how I saw myself being in that senior position and something to aim for into the future. And really, I think she probably doesn't realise how much influence she has had on my life. And I'm hoping that it wasn't only because she was female, but because of her position within the company, that actually made me, like I say, open my eyes to what is possible for a female, particularly as a young female entering a company of 100 people. And as Kerry mentioned as well, I've slowly, I guess, with the work that I've done with different companies, realised that actually the influence that we have as architects is limited, which is really what caused me to rethink where I'd like to position myself within the stages of work, which has led to my move to now contractor side, but yet still working with people like Be First and the local authorities to deliver affordable housing, but on the different end of the RIBA scale, as it were, so from stage 4 onwards. But I still have that belief, and I think it's really important for all architects, female or male, to have something that you're really passionate about. And I think it was, as I say, during my year out work with my first company, that I really developed a passion for working with existing communities, estate regeneration, and influencing the environment which people live as well as work, their connections to the community, as well as obviously the quality of their housing. And having that belief and keeping to that has really led me through all of my work so far. And it's something that I really want to keep hold of. So I think once you find that passion and something that you really believe in, that's what will lead you to success, in that actually you can feel like you can make a difference in what we do as architects and within the built environment. So that's just a few things that hopefully not everyone will experience as you enter the profession, and I think we all have our stumbling blocks, but I think if we all have the inspiration and influence from other people who can mentor, I think that would be a real big help to all of the young female architects entering the profession.
Thank you so much, Supe. That was such a I resonated a lot of what you said so thank you so much for that. Now we'll hear from Manisha Patel. Manisha spearheads urban design and master planning, regeneration and stakeholder consultant within the practice PRP. She's currently leading leading on some of PRP's most high-profile projects, including Chobham Manor, where she has developed a new typology which facilitates multi-generation living, a design and cultural expression of her upbringing. She's also responsible for the master plan on Portobello Square, which won the Mayor's Prize at 2015 Housing Design Awards. One of PRP's most innovative thinkers, Manisha brings creativity, motivational team leadership, and expert knowledge in urban regeneration to the board. Manisha acts as a Mayor of London design advocate and provides expertise and guidance to the Mayor's Good Growth programme, which will ensure sustainable and inclusive development in the capital and the highest design standards on projects commissioned by the GLA. Thank you, Manisha. Over to you.
Hi, I hope you can all hear me. Had a bit of mic problems earlier on. Thank you for inviting me to this. It's an incredible opportunity, and I have to say I'm coming across more and more groups, which I'm really pleased to see. I started my career off, I would say, in the 90s during a massive recession. So it's been quite a bit of a career, mainly within one practice, I have to say, within PRP. But just to give you a bit of background about myself, I was brought up in Hounslow in London, so I see myself as a true Londoner. But very early on, I started realizing that, you know, I was brought up in a culture which was, and an area which was 70% ethnic. So my upbringing was very much sheltered and not really looking at how East and West interact or meet. My whole friend circle, social life was very much within the Asian community. And I would say that when I was at school, I did design technology. And just to give you an idea, I was the only girl doing design technology. So obviously I wanted to pursue that subject because either I wanted to be able to get a boyfriend because there was a lot of males in the class, or why else would I want to do design technology? So, you know, you started realizing that there were barriers from an early age, from your schooling right the way through as you moved on. So I decided that I wanted to do architecture and announced it to my parents and all of my extended family, because they were all involved in life decisions, who quickly turned around and said, "Oh, that's not a career for an Asian. What's wrong with becoming a doctor or an accountant?" So I said, no, this is really something I believe in. I want to be an architect. I want to design. Well, that's going to have real pressures when we start looking for a husband for you. My God, engineers are hard to find. So it was, you know, they were thinking of it from a completely different point of view. And I was thinking of it in terms of, this is something I want to pursue. So, you know, to be fair to them, I did say, okay, I'll try two paths. So I'll do accountancy A-level, economics, and design technology. So at the time, I'll please everybody and see where I get to. Anyway, I ended up in architecture in a predominantly male course. I'm 4'10". I am ethnic, 4'10", walk into the first time walking into the meet with all the other 50 architects. It was quite overwhelming because there was only 2 people of colour, I would say, within that 50. From that point on, I started realising that you're almost learning a different culture. So being within architecture is a different culture from what you're brought up with. So are you relearning a culture, or are you embedding yourself into a culture, or are you teaching people about your culture? You do behave in a different way. but I managed to get through in terms of the university side of it, and get, you know, with the really seeing housing as something which I had a passion for. Oxford Brookes gave me the opportunity of doing urban design as part of my architecture course, and really opened me up in terms of the world of master planning and social change, and how can you bring all of those things together which you really fight for, and why you think there is inequality between different cultural groups, different ages, different abilities, and that's where I've kind of pursued my career, in terms of really seeing how I can make change in terms of just socially, as well as how do you bring different people from different backgrounds together. That has led me to doing the multi-generational house, and really looking at multi-generational flats as something which I think is not just typologies for ethnic groups. It's something which people are facing in society in terms of support and care, and how that cross-working between different cultures works as well. So housing actually gives us the opportunity to be able to have the dialogue between different groups of people. But it also, it is very much from my background. Being the interest in regeneration actually gave me my first job, which was working at volunteering, because I sent 150 applications, I would say, maybe more than that, during the coming out of university as a part 2. I had to skip out on the work experience between the part 1 and the part 2, because there just were no jobs around, even if you were, going to be working for free. The barrier there was that I had no connection to professionals. I had no connections. I had no one, as I was growing up, who I could talk to about even being a professional. The only profession I knew was my doctor and dentist. They were the only people I really knew. So actually at that time, having been able to access from a younger age, pre-university, I think is really important. And those are the kind of things which I'm pursuing now, is on a lot of the estate regeneration work we do, is actually part of our social value, is to engage with schools, engage with areas where you do have a high percentage of people who don't have access to professional people, and showing them that an architect doesn't really mean that you're the image of an architect isn't a stereotypical image of an architect, that you can walk into a room and hold that room and be able to design and be proud that you're there within a forum. So regeneration has given me that opportunity. Career-wise within PRP, then I moved to PRP after having the opportunity of working on Peckham 5 estates, communicating, teaching residents how to read drawings, which was incredibly fulfilling, which got snapped up by PRP. And then I suppose my first experiences there were, does your dad have a corner shop? Because of my surname. Set me back slightly. I was thinking, I'm not quite sure how this works, but PRP is a over 50 years old company, and I'm the first ethnic on the board after 50 years, which I was incredibly proud of. But I would say getting there hasn't been the most simple thing in the world. It's meant that I've had to work harder, be tougher, be on top of my game, learn a lot more skills than my counterparts, while having 2 children, which I have to say, as a company, they really supported me through that. But I worked hard to get myself in a position before I had children to be able to prove it, that I felt I had to prove that I was better, that I was the person they wanted to have back after maternity leave, that I could then, after coming off maternity leave, you almost have to prove again that that you can do it all. You can be a mother, you can have a career, I do turn around and tell my younger staff, it's sometimes like joining a circus. You know, you are juggling so many things in the air, not just as a female, but you know, you're a female, you're a mother, you're from a diverse community. People look at you differently. Some of the experiences I've had, positive and negative. Positively, I think housing gives people from ethnic backgrounds who are architects a lot more of a voice, a lot more of a place that you can actually speak out. We do many forms of buildings, not just regeneration, and I do work within private rental sector, build to rents. I'm also working on town centre regeneration, so coming across different people at different points in terms of the building process, seeing things from a initial idea right the way through it being built on site, and a complete different culture at every point, I have to say. But when you're actually, the housing tends to be a lot more accepting, a lot more, I would say, can be equal. But when you're looking at the commercial sector in terms of architecture, I think we all have to be very clear that there is still a different cultural divide in terms of how things work, the perception of architects, and your access in terms of career development. And I know that from a couple of practices, and I would love it if the cultures were very, very similar. And I think that that's one of the things that we should be pursuing in the future in terms of policy. The culture has to be similar, no matter what form of architecture you're designing. And that's something which I think is going to take quite a long time, because housing is forward thinking, because we're dealing with people from different backgrounds. And that is an incredibly strong place we're in at the moment. And my pursuit is, so my career has also taught me I have to be tougher, better, bigger, not taller, because I'm going to stay at 4'9". I think I'm actually shrinking, but that's another story. And I've put in so many things within PRP as a practice that we have equality amongst women, career paths, really talking, mentors, incredibly important. I was lucky to have a mentor of Irish background, actually, who also believes he's part of he's different from he's had to fight for where he's got to. And I always say, well, I think it's a little bit easier for you because you don't look different. When he said, well, I do sound different. So there is there's other groups. I'm also finding now, which is incredibly important moving forward, we're not only just looking at people who are from ethnic backgrounds in terms of groups at PRP and the policies that we have in terms of equality, we're also looking at people from Eastern European backgrounds, or people who are here in terms of their, coming across working in the UK, because we're seeing that they're also having barriers, just like we did as first generation. And I think that that's something that needs to be acknowledged throughout the kind of policy and the way that we move forward. But I do think that there is an opportunity, and I'm taking every opportunity possible, now being, I would say, at the top of my game in PRP. When I became a board director, I celebrated it with samosas and Prosecco because we needed to have a little twist, and bringing in international cuisine evenings, really embedding that people are different and celebrating that within the culture, looking at our recruitment policies, looking at the way that we have our team set up, encouraging our female architects that it's not just housing you can design, you are able to design other forms of building, and almost mentoring them through how they navigate through, some difficult client sets who have a perception of how they want people to present, or who they want within the group. We see it in regeneration all the time. You look at your team, you look at the team, and you look at if it's public sector, you're going to have more of a mixed team. And I think that's where there's got to be a balance between, in terms of policy moving forward, is how do you make people equal without pushing out the fact that you're a different group. It should start becoming the natural norm of where your background comes from. Shouldn't matter. It should be your talent. It should be what you can do. It should be an acceptance. And that's something which I am pursuing through talks, through working with schools. I think that they are an incredibly good source, and also encouraging a lot more female ethnics, females from ethnic backgrounds, to say that architecture is actually acceptable, because I can look around the industry and I still don't see that many people. I'm still in a room where I'm the only person sitting there from a different background.
Thank you so much for that, Manisha. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. We really appreciate it. Now we would like to turn to our speakers for their reflection on, as closing remarks of this event and what has been discovered. So if you could please keep it very brief and summarize in one sentence your reflection of this event. So I'll start with Pooja first, please.
Thank you. Super inspiring. It's really, really nice to hear all these different experiences. I think the main thing for me to take away is just the support that we all offer each other, and knowing who we can all reach out to kind of help us all move forward together. And that's what I'm going to kind of keep thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Dr. Terry Okoro, please.
Just to say that, yes, it's important that we continue the discussion, but we must engage others who can assist us make a difference to be part of the discussion. Otherwise, we're just speaking to ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. We have encouraged everyone to join, but unfortunately, we have very limited amount of men joining this discussion. Which is a shame, but hopefully next time we'll have more men joining us. So now if I could turn to Supe, please, for your reflection.
Hi, yeah, I mean, I think I reflect Pooja's comments as well, that actually seeing so many females who have achieved so much is, I mean, it's an inspiration to me. And I hope we can kind of inspire each other to push forward and not let it defeat us.
Thank you. Now, if I can turn to Manisha, please.
Well, thank you for this session. It's been really great. It has actually made me reflect in terms of the position I'm in, and I'm actually in a very good position. PRP I'm one of three running a company which is over 250 people in all different sides of architecture, as well as different parts of the built environment. I kind of feel, taking away from this event, I have a lot more responsibility in a way of being able to, I have the access to avenues which really can help make change. And in everyday people I meet in different, where we were talking about people in different positions, and I get to meet a lot of people, and it would be very good to continue this conversation.
Thank you so much. My thanks and gratitude to all the speakers for your generosity in time and effort for the contribution to this event. My thanks to all the audience and your participation. And what I will take away from this is the importance of role model. And I hope we've managed to showcase, such a range of role models within the speakers and within the audience that were present in this event. So to summarize then, we feel that there is an urgent need, and also there is an urgent need to speak to others, not to speak to the converted. And this is our second event. So we are hosting a series of events to continue this discussion. And next time we would do maybe try to do things differently to encourage different people to join join. It's not the female conversation. It's a conversation for everybody. But I was especially inspired by our speakers' take on how we could change policies and how policies could help improve the lives of the communities that we live in, not just the communities of practitioners, but the wider community, and how important it is to talk to and to engage with the communities that we are living in. So as Fame Collective, we hope to grow in providing the much needed support towards female architects or minority ethnic, and to overcome the barriers of racial and gender inequality, both in academia and in practice. We hope to inspire others to come forward and to join us in our discussions about experiences of discrimination in the built environment. And yeah, so we're almost up for time. So I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us, and like to take this opportunity to thank the NLA. And if you're interested in more events like this, please keep an eye out for NLA's Diverse Leaders Program. And yeah, thanks to the volunteers who helped me put together this event from Fame. So yeah, have a lovely day. Thank you very much. I hope you can join us next time as well. Thank you.